Hey everyone, it's your favorite, Drami. My analysis series on horror films and directing techniques has received incredible feedback and praise, and I truly thank every one of you supporters from the bottom of my heart. This channel doesn't have any earth-shattering tricks. I'm just the YouTuber who passionately watches movies right alongside you. Today, I want to talk about a Hong Kong, Taiwanese horror masterpiece that terrified Asia back in the day. Often mentioned in the same breath as double vision, it's the eye. You know the saying, seeing is believing. But sometimes, what you can see is far more terrifying than what you can't. Some say the world holds both ugliness and beauty, but Ji Wen, blind since childhood, knew nothing of these concepts. Luckily for her, she was about to undergo a corneal transplant surgery. The ability to see, something most people are born with, was an impossible dream for Ji Wen. A surgery lasting just 2 hours represented over 20 years of waiting for Ji Wen. Wrapped in layers of gauze, surrounded by constant sounds, Ji Wen instinctively grabbed the hand of a little girl who approached her. The little girl's name was Yingying, a frequent patient at the hospital due to a brain tumor. Yingying really liked this older sister who was about to see the world, and eagerly invited Ji Wen to hang out once she recovered. Because Yingying told Ji Wen that the world is truly beautiful. A few days later, witnessed by family and friends, the surgeon, Dr. Liu, removed the final 2 layers of gauze for Ji Wen, incredibly nervous inside. Ji Wen, under the watchful eyes of her grandma and her sister Jiaji, meaningfully opened her eyes for the first time in her life. Her eyelids trembled. The warm light felt surprisingly harsh, making it hard for her to adjust, but Ji Wen tried hard. Slowly attempting to focus, the outlines of her loved ones remained incredibly blurry, but just then, in her peripheral vision to the left of those outlines, stood a disturbing figure cloaked in black. The sight made Ji Wen immediately shut her eyes in pain. Her grandma, worried about her granddaughter, mentioned that Ji Wen had never cried out in pain her whole life. Fearing something was wrong, Dr. Liu explained it was a normal phenomenon. After all, the new cornea needed time to integrate with the cranial nervous system, and things did seem to proceed just as Dr. Liu had said. Waking up in the morning, Ji Wen gradually adapted to the sunlight, happily calling out to Yingying in the next bed. Although her vision was still blurry, only showing outlines, Ji Wen genuinely liked this cheerful and lively fellow patient. But the moment she got up to look around, Ji Wen caught a glimpse of a figure in white in the corner by the door. At that moment, Ji Wen dismissed it as just a passerby, not paying much attention. Although she could now see things blurrily, Dr. Liu explained that transplant patients initially see things as if severely nearsighted, everything hazy. He said her eye muscles needed time to adapt and return to normal function, so she needed to stay in the hospital for a few more days of observation. Being able to see was already an immense blessing. Ji Wen's first thought was to rush to the bathroom mirror to finally see her own face. Still needing touch to perceive her surroundings, Ji Wen looked up at the mirror for the first time. She could vaguely see her hands and her own outline in the reflection. For the first time, she could see her own face without relying on touch. Just then, Yingying walked over. Though Ji Wen couldn't see her clearly, she recognized her instantly. She happily promised Yingying they would definitely hang out together once Yingying recovered. Yingying also left them a photo together, capturing the bright smile of Ji Wen, who in the picture didn't even know where the camera was. Late at night in the hospital room, Ji Wen got up for water and saw a black figure appear silently by the opposite bed, seemingly beckoning the patient on it. Then, shockingly, the 2 figures seemed to phase right through the closed hallway door. Feeling bewildered and curious, Ji Wen stepped out of her room. The dim hallway was utterly silent, so quiet you could hear the drip of infraneedle. Just as she turned to go back to her room, a familiar sound echoed the pain moans her elderly roommate made every night. Following the sound, she saw a blue figure standing at the end of the blurry hallway. As the eerie sound grew louder, Ji Wen couldn't resist her curiosity and walked forward, softly asking the old woman if she was all right. The sound stopped abruptly. The blue figure vanished around the corner. Just as Ji Wen felt a slight sense of relief, a scream suddenly erupted right beside her ear. The sound floated around her, yet there were no footsteps. Before she could recover from the shock, the old woman reappeared, standing rigidly in front of Ji Wen. Unable to see the face clearly, Ji Wen instinctively reached out to touch the blurry image of the woman, drawing closer and closer. Just as she was about to make contact, the old woman vanished. Everything dissipated like a dream. The next morning, a nurse's voice woke Ji Wen, informing her that the old woman in the opposite bed had indeed passed away. This confused Ji Wen greatly, as she was sure she'd seen someone visiting the woman last night, but the nurse insisted that late-night visits were impossible, stating firmly, "You must have been mistaken." However, This confusion was quickly overshadowed by the joy of being discharged soon. Her sister, Jiaji, due to work commitments, came to pick Jiwon up 2 days early, although Jiwon still couldn't see everything clearly. Just experiencing the blurred outlines of the city filled her with happiness suddenly. On the highway, a man dressed in black stood motionless in the middle of the road, which was obviously highly unusual, but Jiwon held back and didn't ask Jiaji about it. This time, Jiaji took Jiwon to see a counselor, Awa. Because Jiwon had been blind since the age of 2, she had essentially forgotten most visual vocabulary over 20+ years. It was like when Awa showed her a stapler. Even if Jiwon saw it, she needed to touch it to identify it. This was Awa's job as a counselor, to help Jiwon build visual recognition and memory connections like a sighted person. However, Awa also admitted he was concerned about Jiwon's psychological adjustment, as many who regain sight can feel estranged and fearful of the visible world. Looking at the strong and independent Jiwon before him, Awa felt a flicker of something different in his heart. Returning home alone, Jiwon watched old home videos her father had taken of her childhood. For the first time, Jiwon truly saw what that introverted girl, growing up in silent struggle, looked like. Suddenly, as if guided by an unseen force, Jiwon opened the front door. A little boy stood outside, asking if Jiwon had seen his report card. Hearing the voice, her grandma came over asking who it was. When Jiwon mentioned the boy asking for his report card, Grandma's expression changed instantly. She snapped, "That crazy kid," telling Jiwon to ignore him. As soon as she spoke, Jiwon looked again, and the boy was gone, just standing forlornly a short distance away. Jiwon glanced up unintentionally and noticed two striking white lanterns hanging on the neighbor's door far away. White lanterns often signify mourning in Chinese culture. Her vision still blurry, Jiwon naturally didn't grasp the cultural meaning of those white lanterns. Suddenly, the chaotic strumming of a pipa, a Chinese lute, echoed from behind her. An eerie feeling crept up the stairwell before she could react. Sensing something, Jiwon spun around. The same little boy was now squatting in front of her, head in his hands. Jiwon crouched down and was horrified to see the boy picking up white candles from the ground and stuffing them into his mouth. Suddenly, a door opened behind her. A man stepped out asking Jiwon what was going on. But the candle-leading boy vanished once again. Jiwon ignored the man who was relighting the candles and left, completely baffled. The next day, Jiwon returned to the orchestra where she had practiced for many years, rehearsing with her old teammates. The conductor was happy for Jiwon's recovery, but gently suggested she might consider leaving the orchestra for the blind to live life as a normal-sighted person. Just as they were talking, Jiwon suddenly realized she could clearly see the face of the man who had come to see the conductor. This meant her vision had finally reached a near-normal level. This unexpected clarity momentarily captivated Jiwon, making her stare. However, deep sleep that night brought ominous signs for Jiwon. She started having recurring nightmares, filled with the cawing of crows, images of severely burnt patients, and chaotic hospital scenes flashing through her mind. Finally jolting awake from the nightmare, she saw the living room sofa area where she'd been sleeping transform, just like in the dream. The scenery began to bleed and fade, gradually morphing into an unfamiliar room. But thinking her eyes were just playing tricks on her, Jiwon chose to lie back down again. The night passed without further incident. The following morning, Jiwon, ready to leave, said goodbye to her grandma who was heading back to the countryside, only to encounter the boy asking for his report card again. This time, the alert grandma heard the voice and immediately looked through the peephole, but there was no one else outside. It was just Jiwon talking to thin air. Grandma, being experienced in life, had her suspicions about things unseen. She immediately invited a spiritual master to the neighboring boy's home to perform a ritual. It turned out, the day the boy came home from his exams, he had lost his report card. His parents, assuming he did poorly and was lying, scolded him harshly. This misunderstanding pushed the boy over the edge, and he jumped from the stairwell. The master explained that suicide carries a heavy spiritual burden. Such souls are forced to relive their death scenario daily. Only when someone helps resolve their lingering obsession can the soul break free from this endless loop and be reincarnated. But none of them noticed a small figure on the balcony above, silently watching everything unfold inside the house, now able to see the world clearly. Jiawon's first instinct was to visit the little girl, Yingying, the one she first took a photo with. Seeing Yingying weakened and lifeless from chemotherapy, Jiwon forced a smile, encouraging Yingying to stay strong. She once again promised they would hang out together once Yingying recovered. However, ever since her vision cleared, Jiawon's nightmares intensified each night. The room transformation she saw upon awaking became more vivid, even showing a cloth hanging, clearly meant for suicide, and the illusory scene A flickering picture frame on the table. A sudden eerie beam of light on the floor that vanished the moment she tried to touch it. Everything would then snap back to her normal room. The next day, Jiwon went to her calligraphy teacher to learn, hoping to relearn characters through writing. Just as Jiwon felt happy about writing her first stroke, a cold voice spoke. "Why are you sitting in my spot?" Following the voice, she saw a woman standing silently in a dim corner. Her lower body obscured, Jiwon glanced back at her teacher, who seemed completely unaware. When she looked again, the woman was gone. Seen so clearly for the first time, Jiwon understood exactly what it meant. She had seen something she shouldn't have. She tried to compose herself, but accidentally knocked over the ink bottle, spilling ink where the ghost had stood. Instantly, the residual image seemed to dissolve as if eroded by the ink. Vanishing completely, shaken, Jiwon immediately ran out. Quick cultural note here, some folklore suggests ghosts fear certain things, including black ink. Who knew that ordinary ink could unexpectedly save Jiwon's life? Realizing she could genuinely see ghosts, Jiwon rushed to Counselor Awa's clinic for help. Unfortunately, Awa was out, so Jiwon had to wander around and wait. Feeling hungry, Jiwon randomly walked into a Chinese BBQ restaurant. After ordering, Jiwon glanced around boredly and saw a mother and son outside the restaurant's glass window, peering in through the rising steam. Even eerier, their ghostly forms seemed to walk right up to the shop entrance. Seeing the other customers and staff react normally, Jiwon knew she was seeing unclean things again and quickly looked down, pretending not to notice. But she stole a glance and saw the mother extend an unnaturally long tongue, licking the roast meats inside the display window from outside. After secretly watching the fake ghostly pair leave, a waiter clearing tables came over to Jiwon. He told her that the mother and son were the late wife and child of the restaurant owner. The owner knew they would visit often, so he refused to ever sell the old shop filled with memories. The waiter sighed. "It might be scary for you to see them, but the owner wishes he could see them again and can't." That might be true. But seeing the roast meats, just licked by a ghost, being served to her, Jiwon couldn't bring herself to eat a single bite. Misfortune loves company. As Jiwon was about to cross the street, she was bumped by a chubby boy running towards her, unexpectedly. The boy ran straight through her body. This stunned both Jiwon and the boy momentarily. Then, hearing shouts and the sounds of a car crash from ahead, Jiwon saw that the person hit by the car on the road was the very same boy who had just run into her. Even more disturbing, behind the boy's rising spirit floated a blurry figure in black, identical to the one she saw taking the patient away in the hospital. Watching the black figure slowly lead the boy's soul away, terrified and desperate to escape, Jiwon was stopped by Awa, who had just arrived. Awa took the deeply shaken Jiwon back to his clinic, overwhelmed by fear. Jiwon incoherently recounted the terrifying experiences she'd had since regaining her sight. However, Awa's suggestion, "Maybe I should take you to see a psychiatrist," instantly made Jiwon realize he didn't truly believe her. Her heartbroken question, "If you don't believe me, how can you help me?" created an awkward tension between them. Returning home that evening, Jiwon saw her grandma and sister Jiaji burning paper offerings by the door. They didn't explain why they were actually burning spirit money for the boy who died in the accident, specifically the report card representing his obsession, hoping he'd find peace and stop bothering Jiwon. But peace is rarely granted to those who can see ghosts. Waiting for the elevator, Jiwon was about to step in when she suddenly saw an old man head down, back towards her, standing in the corner of the elevator car. But she had just seen the monitor by the elevator door showing the car was empty. Before she could turn back, a couple rushed past her into the elevator. Looking at the monitor again, Jiwon confirmed the screen showed only the couple, no old man. The implication was terrifyingly clear. After double-checking, Jiwon cautiously stepped into the adjacent elevator that had just arrived. Pressing the button for her floor 15, she watched the flashing numbers ascend. Feeling anxious and terrified, suddenly, the smooth elevator wall reflected the light, revealing a blurry facial outline. The old man from before had silently appeared in the back corner of her elevator. This time, Jiwon didn't dare turn around, silently praying for the elevator to reach her floor quickly. 8, 9, 10. Watching the floors crawl upwards, she noticed the old man's feet were floating above the ground. He was slowly gliding closer towards her back. Finally, the old man stopped right behind Jiwon, then slowly, ever so slowly, turned to face her. His aged face was horrifyingly missing its right eye, a deep, dark socket occupying most of the right cheek, pushed beyond her limit of fear. Jiwon frantically hammered the open door button. Scrambling out the instant the door slid open, running to her apartment door, she fumbled with the lock. unable to open it. Only then realizing in horror she was on the 14th floor. She scrambled up towards the stairs. In the stairwell, the ghost of the little boy called out to her again, still asking for his report card sometimes. Extreme fear turns into anger. Ji-won finally snapped, yelling at him that she'd never seen any report card. Then she ran desperately up the stairs. Looking back, she saw the boy chanting report card, leap from an open window in the stairwell, reenacting his death. Finally reaching her home, Ji-won could catch her breath, but the day's ordeal had nearly broken her. She could no longer distinguish between the living and the dead. Under immense psychological pressure, Ji-won frantically practiced her familiar cello, locking herself in her room, refusing to go out, even keeping her eyes shut the entire time, as if only the darkness of her former blindness could offer some peace. Meanwhile, Awa went to his uncle, Dr. Liu, hoping to get the donor information. For the corneas Ji-won received, Dr. Liu refused sternly. First, donor information is strictly confidential and cannot be disclosed by regulations. Second, Ji-won claimed she could see ghosts. How could Awa, an educated man, choose to believe such nonsense? Just then, Grandma called Awa, telling him Ji-won was not doing well at all. As Awa got up to leave, he couldn't help but confess to his uncle that he had fallen in love with Ji-won. In the quiet room, Ji-won, eyes closed, solely focused on playing her cello, provoked a rare anger from the concerned Awa. Awa told her hiding wasn't a solution. She had to face what needed to be faced. You can choose to remain blind metaphorically, but at least return to a normal life. Even if blind, returning to the orchestra again, Ji-won chose to play with her eyes closed. But the music, once so familiar, now sounded strangely distorted. Ji-won suddenly began playing uncontrollably, the sound loud yet filled with a bizarre, unsettling energy. It turned out, at the exact same time, her worried grandma had once again invited the spiritual master over, hoping a ritual at home could uncover the source of her granddaughter's strange behavior. The ritual and Ji-won's music resonated eerily across different locations at the same moment. Ji-won seemed to perceive and be disturbed by some force from the other side, eventually collapsing on stage from exhaustion. Unconscious in the hospital, Ji-won was gently woken by a familiar voice. It was Ying-yin, happily telling Ji-won she was being discharged, no more painful treatments. Ji-won finally received the only good news she'd heard in days, feeling happy for Ying-yin. But in the next instant, her peripheral vision caught sight of the familiar, tall, black figure standing behind Ying-yin. In a flash, Ji-won understood she and this lovely little girl were now separated forever by life and death. Listening to Ying-yin, still innocently urging her to be strong and telling her how beautiful the world is, Ji-won couldn't hold back her tears anymore, sobbing uncontrollably. She followed Ying-yin's spirit out of the room, but when she looked back, Ying-yin and the black figure had vanished down the hallway, gone from this world forever. Just then, Dr. Liu approached, about to break the news of Ying-yin's passing, but Ji-won interrupted him, softly saying she already knew Ying-yin had died, and that she had personally watched her leave. This fact, Ying-yin's exact time of death, which theoretically only the attending doctor should know, Ji-won already knew. Dr. Liu was stunned. Could it be? Could Ji-won really see ghosts after attending Ying-yin's funeral? Ji-won just stared blankly at the cold gravestones, only because among the spirits lingering between the graves, she hoped to find Ying-yin's form once more. This was the first time Ji-won felt that seeing ghosts wasn't entirely terrifying. Perhaps these ghost-seeing eyes could also help her see the scenes and people her heart longed for. On the subway ride back, Awa gave Ji-won the card Ying-yin had handmade for her earlier. But Ji-won looked at the only photo of them together on the card and blurted out that Ying-yin had used the wrong picture. Awa was baffled, asking how she couldn't recognize her own face, but Ji-won looked up sharply, compared the photo with her reflection again, and let out a horrified scream. Back home, Ji-won was still deeply unsettled, because the face staring back from the mirror was that of a completely unfamiliar woman, not her own face from all her life. Ji-won angrily smashed the mirror, but the broken shards still reflected the same truth. It was still the stranger's face looking back. The situation had escalated beyond anyone's comprehension. The spiritual master offered his explanation based on his beliefs. In his view, a ghost consciousness is essentially frozen at its final moment before death, meaning whatever they were thinking or fixated on when they died becomes their lingering attachment as a spirit. That's why some who die suddenly and unexpectedly don't even realize they're dead, thinking they are still living. However, those who linger in the human world usually do so because of unresolved issues or troubles. The only way to help these spirits find peace and move on is to help them resolve their unfinished business. Therefore, the illusions Ji-won saw at home and the strange face she saw in the mirror likely originated from the cornea donor. So, only by helping the donor fulfill her last wish could Ji-won's life return to normal. Awa approached his uncle, Dr. Liu, again, this time somewhat persuaded and moved. Liu finally retrieved the highly confidential donor file, hoping it could truly help his nephew. Without delay, Awa and Jiwon immediately set off for Bangkok, Thailand, the donor's former home. The file revealed the donor's name was Chu Weiling, a Thai national of Chinese descent. Following the leads, they found the hospital mentioned in the file where Chu Weiling had stayed. While Awa struggled in English to find Chu Weiling's attending physician from back then, Jiwon turned around and froze. The hospital corridor, the old ceiling fans, the surrounding patients and beds, it was identical to the recurring nightmare scene that had haunted her. She immediately called out to Awa, explaining the shocking discovery. Just then, the physician, Dr. Eek, arrived belatedly. Awa hoped Dr. Eek could share more details about the donor. Facing Dr. Eek's refusal, Jiwon emotionally explained that she could see everything the donor saw right before she died. This statement left Dr. Eek stunned and speechless. Later, Dr. Eek personally led the two towards the village where Chu Weiling, known affectionately as Ling, used to live. It turned out Ling's life had been tragic. Since childhood, she would inexplicably stand outside people's houses shouting warnings. And shortly after, someone in that household would indeed pass away. This led the entire village to brand Ling as a jinx, a harbinger of misfortune. However, as similar incidents kept happening, some rational people began to wonder. Dr. Eek was one of them. He suspected Ling might possess a special ability to foresee death. But out of instinctual fear, he, like the others, chose to isolate and avoid her as darkness fell. They finally reached Ling's home. Now, only Ling's elderly mother lived there alone. After hearing the reason for their visit, the truth about Ling's death gradually emerged. Although Ling endured rejection and discrimination growing up, she had managed to grow into adulthood under her mother's care. But recently, one evening, Ling suddenly ran frantically through the village, yelling at everyone to run, but everyone treated her like a monster, roughly chasing her away. Later that same night, a fire of unknown origin broke out in the village, raging fiercely until the next afternoon. Hundreds of villagers were tragically burned alive in the inferno. Ling, unable to bear the immense guilt and self-blame of knowing she could have prevented the tragedy, chose to hang herself the day after the fire. At this point, everyone understood the full story. Ling had foreseen the impending disaster and desperately tried to warn everyone to flee, but no one believed or understood her. The overwhelming pain of being able to save everyone yet ultimately failing led this kind-hearted girl to end her own life. Suddenly, Jiwon felt a connection. She went to Ling's former room and was astonished to find the surroundings matched the fading illusion she frequently saw back home. Choosing to stay alone in the room, Jiwon rested in this environment that felt both strange and familiar. Late that night, feeling guided again, Jiwon found herself sitting at Ling's desk. She softly asked aloud, "Ling, what is it you really want to tell me?" Instantly, Ling's residual memories flooded Jiawon's vision and mind like a tidal wave. From childhood, Ling had suffered constant rejection from the villagers. Whenever someone died, people would habitually point fingers and curse her as a jinx. Eventually, even families unaffected would drive her away, fearing she'd bring bad luck. But through it all, Ling's mother never gave up on her daughter, never believed she was the jinx or mentally ill as others claimed. It was thanks to her mother's unconditional trust and defense that Ling didn't become psychologically warped, growing up kind and healthy despite everything. On the night before the Great Fire, it was her steadfast mother who accompanied Ling, knocking on door after door, desperately urging people to flee, only to be ruthlessly driven away by family after family. Ultimately overwhelmed, Ling chose suicide in immense pain and despair. Having witnessed all these memories, Jiwon immediately ran downstairs, hoping to persuade Ling's mother to come upstairs and break the painful cycle of Ling reliving her suicide every day due to her lingering attachment. However, Ling's mother seemed hesitant, even resentful. She felt that if they had endured years of misunderstanding and discrimination together, and she had never given up on her daughter, how could her daughter give up on herself so easily after she had raised her against all odds? Hearing the creak of the unoccupied chair automatically turning upstairs, Jiwon knew Ling's suicide time was approaching. She urgently pleaded with the mother to go up. Seeing the mother wouldn't budge, Jiwon steeled herself, went back upstairs alone, and witnessed the painful scene Ling replayed every day. Then, resolutely, Jiwon stood still and hanged herself, too. She wanted to use this reenactment to reawaken the deep love for her daughter buried in the mother's heart. As the sounds of struggle grew louder and the cries became more heart-wrenching, the mother downstairs wrestled with her emotions. Finally, maternal love conquered all. She screamed and rushed up the stairs, embracing the hanging figure of her daughter. The rescued Ling and Jiawon's body wept uncontrollably. finally uttering the long-buried words "I'm sorry," and receiving her mother's forgiveness and release. In that very instant, a miracle occurred. The face Ji-won saw reflected became her own again. Kind-hearted Ling's soul was finally freed, able to pass on peacefully. The next day, having helped Ling find release and conquered her own inner fear, Ji-won began to calmly accept her ghost-seeing eyes. She realized that this extraordinary ability, if used wisely, could potentially help others. Perhaps all the pain and struggle she endured had some kind of indescribable, destined purpose. That night, the return bus was stuck in traffic, forced to stop on the road, waking up alone. Ji-won quietly gazed out the window, enjoying the rare sight of everyday life bustling on the roadside. Suddenly, countless blurry black figures flashed past the window. These were the same figures she had seen in the hospital, and at the crash site the guides responsible for leading souls away. Instantly, a strong sense of foreboding washed over her. Ji-won immediately rushed off the bus without hesitation, following the direction of the black figures. She saw that ahead, a tanker truck carrying natural gas had overturned. Rescue workers were busy trying to save the injured driver, causing a massive traffic jam behind it. But the countless black figures walking among the stopped cars and pedestrians clearly indicated they were about to collect a large number of souls. Remembering the tragic village fire Ling had foreseen, Ji-won realized something terrible was about to happen. A horrific disaster was imminent. Sure enough, all the black figures stopped beside specific vehicles and pedestrians. Ji-won understood immediately, just like the desperate Ling that fateful day. She started frantically shouting and pounding on car windows, hoping people would understand her warning and leave the dangerous area immediately. However, unable to communicate effectively, Ji-won didn't speak Thai. She, like the helpless Ling before her, was ignored and misunderstood by everyone. Just then, the overturned tanker began leaking large amounts of natural gas. The dangerous gas spread rapidly along the ground towards both sides of the road. At that moment, Awa, waking up on the bus, saw Ji-won acting strangely and nervously ahead and rushed after her. Just as the congested traffic started to slowly move, an unaware driver tried to restart his stalled motorcycle engine. Instantly, flames erupted. Sparks ignited the gas lingering on the ground, triggering a massive explosion of the gas tanker. Explosions ripped through the air one after another, like hell unleashed. Countless vehicles were instantly blown to pieces. Passengers trapped inside and pedestrians nearby had no time to escape. Engulfed by the ferocious inferno, cars exploded sequentially, the wave of destruction rapidly advancing down the road. Just as the deadly flames were about to consume Ji-won, Awa appeared just in time, tackling her to the ground. However, flying shards of glass still tragically struck Ji-won's eyes. The two fortunately landed clear of the main blast wave, surviving the deadly flames. But looking up, they saw a street consumed by fire, a truly hellish scene. Countless victims remained frozen in their final moments. Others lay burned on the ground, dying in agony. A sudden catastrophe, so abrupt and violent, perhaps only those mysterious figures in black knew of the disaster's silent approach. With her eyes severely injured again, Ji-won inevitably returned to a world of darkness. However, her brief period of sight had not only shown her the world's pain and ugliness, but also allowed her to experience indescribable beauty and genuine emotion. Ji-won firmly believed that merely knowing about the world's truth, goodness, and beauty is incomplete only after witnessing and experiencing the so-called darkness and suffering, yet still choosing to believe in truth, goodness, and beauty that constitutes a truly positive, bright, and meaningful life. Besides, Ji-won, having regained and lost her sight, had also finally encountered something more beautiful than sight itself: love. Okay, stories told. Now for our hardcore analysis time. The eye this part ends is absolutely a 2000 masterpiece from the Pang brothers Oxide and Danny Pang, teaming up with then rising star Angelica Lee, creating a historic classic that blends Eastern warmth with extreme horror. This film didn't just launch Angelica Lee to Scream Queen status. It also reached breathtaking new heights in its filming techniques and horror atmosphere creation. It's genius. What's the most brilliant part? It's how the directors use a progressive visual clarity to subtly hint at how the protagonist Karen's let's use the international name Karen here ghost-seeing eyes evolve step by step. It's truly masterful. Phase 1. Initial recovery, like seeing the world through 500-degree nearsighted glasses. Everything's hazy, hard to tell human from ghost. The horror comes from the unknown and the blur. Phase 2. Mid-film ghost sightings vision. Upgrades directly to 1080p Ultra HD mode. Now she sees the ghost crystal clear, cranking up the creepy details and the shock value of up-close scares. Phase 3. Final ending. It's like unlocking 4K level death premonition. She's no longer just seeing ghost, but the disaster itself. This shift in ability also elevates the film's scope from personal horror to collective tragedy. The hidden details the Pang brothers buried will seriously make you think. For instance, a super clever metaphor: when Karen is in the Thai village, forced to relive the donor Ling's death loop, pay close attention to the calendar on her room wall. Isn't it perpetually stuck on the day before the village fire? That's the director's masterful visual representation of obsession made manifest. Ling's consciousness is forever trapped in the moment before the tragedy, unable to move forward. This film swept international markets, becoming one of the few Chinese-language horror films to resonate with both Eastern and Western audiences. The key lies in the director's perfect balance of the East meets West cultural code. It's practically textbook execution. Chinese exorcism elements. You see Karen using traditional blacking to scare away the ghost. The calligraphy. Teacher's place. Grandma and her sister burning spirit money at the door trying to appease the little boy. Ghost resentment. These are familiar Eastern folk rituals. Thai concepts of reincarnation. Ling being trapped in a loop of reliving her death daily due to suicide closely ties into Theravada Buddhist ideas about karma and reincarnation, especially the notion that suicides have difficulty moving on. Universal themes of redemption. Ultimately, what breaks Ling's death loop isn't magic, but the power of maternal love and Karen's sacrificial empathy. Karen's final choice to accept her ability and try to save others, along with Awa's selfless love, all touch upon the core themes of love and redemption that transcend cultural boundaries. This cross-cultural horror grammar allows audiences from different backgrounds to find points of understanding and fear. Of course, in a successful horror film, the actor's performance is the soul. Angelica Lee's award-worthy master-class performance deserves its own episode. Don't just focus on the screams. Pay attention to the subtle changes in her eyes and physiological reactions during her 3 encounters with spirits. One first encounter with the old woman ghost in the hospital. It's not just wide eyes. It's an instantaneous earthquake-like contraction of the pupils, accompanied by an unconscious swallow and a faint throat tremor, purely instinctual. Fear response to elevator nightmare. In a state of extreme fear, but afraid to turn around, she uses an accelerating blink rate to try and control or alleviate her inner breakdown, simultaneously revealing her state of near collapse. 3 final premonition of the highway disaster. Her eyes no longer hold just fear, but a mix of the predictor's despair, helplessness, and even a flicker of a divine awakening. A desire to save others. Let me tell you a secret. This nuanced method of portraying fear through physiological reactions was later extensively used by horror master James Wan in his The Conjuring series. So Angelica Lee's performance here was quite ahead of its time. Next up, the truly groundbreaking filming techniques. The Pang brothers were definitely having fun back then. New Section 1 revolutionary use of subjective camera POV reportedly. A staggering 30% of the film was shot from Karen's first-person perspective. This completely immerses us, the audience, in her anxiety and fear. What's even more brilliant is how the color temperature of the frame subtly shifts with her emotions, like tending towards cool blues and greens during fear, or suffused with a warm yellow during sadness or memory, guiding emotions through color. Masterful. To psychological suggestion via sound montage, the directors cleverly used the sound of the tool Karen relied on when blind, the click-clack of a Braille typewriter, turning it into a recurring fear trigger throughout the film. Every time the sound appears, it foreshadows unease or the imminent appearance of a spirit, planting a deep psychological shadow in the audience's mind. 3 subconscious unease through negative space composition. Notice how most spirits first appear near the frame's rule of thirds, points about 1/3 in, or edges the so-called negative space. This compositional technique creates a subconscious feeling of unease and being watched, making you constantly feel like something is off in the frame. For the historic fire scene long take, one of the film's most powerful sequences is the massive highway explosion at the end. That incredible 147-second over for minutes uncut inferno scene reportedly burned through 1/3 of the crew's budget back then, but the effect is stunning. The immersive sense of suffocation and destruction still feels chilling today. Finally, the directors leave us, the audience, with an ultimate open-ended puzzle. When the now blind again Karen calmly states at the end of the film, "Not being able to see has actually made me see the world more clearly." What did she really lose? Was it just the corneas that allowed her to see ghosts? Or, after everything she experienced, was it the rose-tinted filter through which she viewed complex humanity? I want to hear your interpretation of this question. Tell me your answer in the comments using the emoji, See Movies with Insight. Drami helps you see the real deal. Thank you for your patient viewing and companionship. See you next time. Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Drami. See you in the next video. Bye.